Welcome to Macon Memories at Randolph-Macon College. I'm Lynda Wright. Today is February 23rd, 2009, and I'm here with Mary Maxwell and Mike Carter.
Hi, my name is Mary Maxwell, and I have been working at Randolph-Macon for 40 years. If anybody had told me I would be here that long, I would have never believed it. I came to Randolph-Macon in 1968. I thought I'd be here a couple of years and then I'd stay home for a while. But I was hired by Tom Vaughn in the computer center, and I worked in the computer center as a key punch operator for 10 years.
And I'm Mike Carter, and I was educated here at Randolph-Macon, attending the college from 1971 to 1975 when I graduated. In 1981, I joined the development office of the college and have been in one capacity or the other with the development office since that time.
As an employee in the computer center, Daisy Peterson and I started the very same day. I eventually was moved to the academic dean's office because the secretary there had quit for some reason, and they needed somebody in the dean's office. Howard Davis was the academic dean at that time, and they asked me would I work part-time in the computer center and part-time in the dean's office. And I reminded them that I had not typed a letter in 10 years, but if they were willing to put up with me, I would try it. And as it turned out, I ended up working full-time in the dean's office for another 10 years.
As a member of the development office, I've seen our operation grow significantly. When I joined the college in 1981 as the director of annual giving, we had a relatively small shop. There were really four of us, a vice president, an assistant vice president, mainly for major gifts, myself, and we also had Roseanne Schauf, who was a grants person. And from that point, the operation grew over the years, adding new staff. And I believe today we have in the entire advancement office 31 people, so a pretty significant increase. In fact, back in '81, the entire alumni and development offices were located on the second floor of Peel Hall in relatively small quarters.
I can tell you a couple of little funny things that happened when I was working in the dean's office. A professor came into the office and I said, "Well, hello, Mr. So-and-so, how are you today?" And he said to me, "You can call me Bill, or you can call me Doctor, but don't ever call me Mister." And I said, "Oh, okay, I will remember that, Bill." And another little funny thing that happened one time was, of course, this was before computers, and we did everything on electric typewriters, and then we would run them off on mimeograph and stick them in all the little mailboxes. And I had typed a memo to all the faculty and staff and stuffed all the mailboxes, and I happened to go in the mailroom one day, I guess it was the next day, and there was my memo tacked to the bulletin board with a red mark around one word that I had misspelled. And I said, well, needless to say, I know how to spell that now. But I thought that person must not have had much to do that day, because whoever did it could have come to me and said, "Oh, Mary, you misspelled this word." But anyway, I took it as a joke, and it didn't really bother me.
Early in my career as a development person at Randolph-Macon, I had the good fortune to work with and for Liddell Payne. And one of the things that I remember and probably had great influence over me was at the college. As you know, Liddell, in his former life, was a professor of English and taught many a freshman composition course. Well, he applied those same high standards to his colleagues at Randolph-Macon. In fact, I remember the first 2 or 3 letters that I presented to him for his approval. They came back to me with a sea of red ink. Ultimately, over the next weeks, months, and years, I was able to come close to what he was expecting. And ultimately, it made me a much better writer. And it instilled upon me the importance of having those very high standards in writing, which I expect of others in the development office and elsewhere today. So I have to give Liddell credit for having influenced me in that regard and making us all realize that a college like Randolph-Macon that prides itself on developing a person's ability to communicate effectively, that those types of standards had to apply to everyone and in all that we do and all that we put into print.
You also have to remember that back in 1968 when I came here, it was all male. We had about 700 male students, and we didn't go co-ed until 1971. But back then we also didn't have the copy center that we have now and different other departments that are on campus now. And I always remember that when James Henry worked in the copy center at that time, and when commencement came, he ran off the commencement program, and he would set it out on a table. And from Catherine Davis, who was the secretary to the president at that time, Luther Wright, she and I and the faculty secretaries would go around that table, collate the commencement programs, staple them together, and have them ready by the time commencement was due.
I was a student at the time that we welcomed 50 co-eds as resident students to Randolph-Macon. And that first semester, that fall of 1971, we certainly did our best to welcome these students, although I was a freshman at the time, so I really didn't have anything to contrast. But I understand that it didn't take very long for many of these co-eds to be well entrenched in the fabric of social life here at the college. In fact, some of them, before too long, had little special nicknames that were assigned to them. Some of them were not necessarily ones that they want to carry on and share with their children. But clearly there were some co-eds, female students, that were here because of the very favorable male-female ratio that existed. But they also brought, I think, looking back especially, a higher level of academic life to the college. The student who graduated 1 and 2 in our class were both women who matriculated when I did back in '81. So I think it brought a lot more diversity and color and interest in life to the college. So whoever was involved in the decision to go coeducation certainly made a wise choice.
Another little story I remember when I was working in the dean's office. This young man started as a freshman, and about halfway through that first semester, his dad called the office one day, and he said, "You know, I'm really worried about my son. I'm not sure that he's going to pass biology." And I said, "Well, let me give you the names of a couple of tutors." And I said, "And also, please tell him to go talk to his professor. They are there to help him. And once he talks to his professors and gets with the two." I never heard back from that father again, but at Christmas, before the kids went home for the holidays, I received a nice tin of home-baked cookies. And so I took it from that his young son did okay in his biology class.
I spend a lot of time traveling on behalf of the college, meeting with alumni and friends. And I often hear stories, fond memories of the college from these alumni. And usually in a conversation, an alumnus will mention a particular favorite professor, but not always a professor. Sometimes it was even the Randolph-Macon custodian. And I remember visiting a few years ago Dave Strobel, who is a dermatologist now who practices in Baltimore. And he asked me about two people that he thought were ones that were somewhat instrumental in his life and education. The first was Schuyler Miller, who was the professor of chemistry, who he was convinced it was his recommendation that got him into MCV. The second was James Randolph, who happened to be the custodian of Garland Dorm. And Dave remembered fondly that he, like Schuyler Miller, took an interest in Dave and asked him about his studies and exams and did little things to support him and us in the dorm. In fact, that was a time where the custodians would come into the rooms, would sweep the rugs, empty the trash, and in some occasions with James would actually put our socks back into our shoes for us so we wouldn't necessarily misplace our socks. So clearly, in my travels, Randolph-Macon and its education is defined so often by one or two people that have really intervened in a person's life. Most of the time it's faculty. My education was defined by James Scanlon, who was certainly my mentor and who I took many, many classes from, but not always a professor. In the case of James Henry, both Dave Strobel and I both remember him very fondly as somebody who indeed took an interest in us, and that was kind of the Randolph-Macon way, that we were a people place and a friendly place, and it was a special time.
I had mentioned Mrs. Catherine Davis earlier as being the secretary to the president, and she was here for a long time. I don't really remember how many years she was here, but she got sick with cancer and was out for a while, and when she came back, she moved over to the development office. Well, eventually Mrs. Davis finally passed away, and so they needed another person in the development office. So I went and talked to Paul Yockey, and I said, I've worked in 2 departments at this college already, but I've never worked in the development office. And for some unknown reason, he said, we'd like to have you in here. So I started in about 1988 working in the development office, and I have been there ever since, and I've seen a lot of people come and go, but we have a bigger office now than we ever had. And I have enjoyed being a key punch operator. I enjoyed working in the dean's office. As a matter of fact, one of the deans I worked for is now a president of a college in North Carolina. And I have enjoyed working for the development office.
Getting back to those years when I was a student, one of the advantages, of course, with coeducation was that we didn't have to go to Mary Washington College or Longwood College or West Hampton College for our entertainment. But it was actually, over the years that I was a student, there was, of course, a much larger number of women on campus. And I remember in my senior year, I, in fact, was dating a girl who was a student in Randolph-Macon, someone who 2 trustees today actually dated as well. But in any case, in January of 1975, I was in my room in Jones' dorm, and I happened to have my English setter with me. Even though there was provision against keeping animals in the dorms, oftentimes it was overlooked. but I would keep my English setter in my room, especially during hunting season. I also had a supply of firearms in the closet during hunting season. I would get notices periodically from Ira Andrews, the dean of the students then, telling me that I should get rid of both. But by the time I got the customary third notice, hunting season was over and I took Blue back home. But getting back to that evening in January 1975, I told Blue to stay put, and I'll be back in an hour or so. I used the occasion to go down to Mary Branch, where I would visit this girl that I was dating. Her name was Ann Graves. And I said, Blue, you stay here. I'll be back in a little bit. And I closed the door. Well, I went down to Mary Branch, and I was visiting with Ann at the time. And about a half an hour later, there was a scratch at Ann's door. Well, it happened to be Blue. Apparently somebody had let him out, and off he went looking for his owner. And interestingly, he was able to find me. He had never been to that room before. I guess they kind of are trained to use their nose, and I guess the scent was still fairly hot. But anyway, Blue, it was very, very quick to realize he had never been in a girl's dorm before, and so his manners were rather questionable. And of course, a person or an animal that kind of lives with his nose, he was in kind of a wonderland of smells that he had never known before. And it wasn't long before Blue had made his way and was smelling something in Ann's closet. And I, of course, told Blue that get out of there and behave yourself. Well, he actually turned to me. He backed up and turned around from the closet, and he had draped from his nose, maybe I ought not to say this, but it was a pair of women's underwear. Needless to say, that was the last time that I or Blue were invited back to Mary Branch.
Well, two things have come to mind since I've been listening to Mike talk. One, when I remember students when those women first came to Randolph-Macon, and one of them I remember very well was Ann McDougall, and of course she is now a trustee of the college. And several of the young men and women who were at Randolph-Macon then, I now see their children at Randolph-Macon, and it's just nice to know that you've been here long enough that not only did you see them when they were young adults, but now their children are coming to Randolph-Macon. And the other thing that he just said that reminded me of a little story was one morning I came to work, and of course at that particular time I was working in, I guess, the dean's office, and I parked my car and got out, and there was a string of underwear from the top window of, I guess it was Mary Branch, to what? What other building would it have been? Of course,
Could have been Conrad.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe from Mary Branch to Conrad, there was a whole line of ladies' underwear strung across the top of the building. But I'm sure it wasn't too long before Dean Andrews probably took care of that too.
When I was a student, it was quite the case that faculty would make themselves available beyond normal classroom hours and beyond normal office hours as well. In fact, as a history major, I often would spend some time with either Professor Scanlon or George Oliver. Found so remarkable about my education is that beyond what was taught and learned in the classroom were the occasions where we would socialize with some of our favorite faculty members. And I remember on Friday afternoons late, Scanlon would always welcome students with small glass of Madeira and understand that George Oliver did the same. It was kind of their chance to unwind, and they certainly wanted students to be involved in it and join them for it as well. But I understand that type of attitude and those kinds of activities were also commonplace in other departments as well. I think today there are a few faculty who join their students with a drink, but I think there are quite a number that receive a lot of joy in being able to meet and get to know students beyond what is typically the case in the classroom.
Well, now that I have gotten to the development office, I have been in the development office now for 20 years, and during those 20 years, I have seen and worked for 4 vice presidents. We have twice the amount of employees in our building than when I first started, and the only drawback to working in the development office is that we are cross-campus, across the railroad tracks, and we do not have the interaction with the students and the faculty that we had when we were on the other side of the tracks in the main administration building. And the only time students come to our office is either they're lost, they're looking for a particular building, or they work in our office as a student assistant.
I would expect by now someone will have mentioned the name of Schnookums. But if they haven't, I might want to mention that because I think it ought to be something to be recorded, certainly. Schnookums was a ward of the town of Ashland. I understand he shined shoes at local Coon's barber shop, and typically in return for the 25 cents or whatever he would charge, he would then take the money and go down to the liquor store and buy one of his favorite beverages. But he was quite often conspicuous on campus, and especially at football games. Schnookums was, I think his last name was Strauss. He was an African American, very small in stature, probably 4'2" or 3. Certainly had a handicap, I think, physical handicap. But he was certainly a character and would often have his Randolph-Macon beanie. Would often wear that. I'm sure an alumnus over the years had given him one. But I remember that he would often go around and panhandle, ask students or faculty for a quarter, which he would go down and use to buy whatever he wanted at the local ABC store. And his saying was, "Give me a quarter, or I'm going to kill you." And of course no one paid much attention to him because he certainly wasn't someone who would probably want or could kill you. But occasionally people would give him a dime or a quarter or whatever. Well, one day at a football game, he was walking the sidelines, typically near the end zone, and he was shaking his fist at the crowd, at the opposing football team, and was ranting, "I'm going to kill you." And in any case, there was the crowd that day was watching the game in progress, and the line of scrimmage was gradually moving in the direction of Schnookums. And eventually he was right there at the center of attention. Of course, he was on the sidelines. But sure enough, Randolph-Macon had the ball and was about 10 or 15 yards from scoring to the halfback. Well, they ran that play. They pitched out to the halfback, and the defense strung the play out and forced the linemen of both sides as well as the halfback out of bounds and in the direction of Schnookums. Well, Schnookums didn't see what was coming, And of course, he was once the play ended, there was probably 12 or 15 players on the ground, all out of bounds, and underneath the stack was Schnookums. Of course, when that happened, the crowd was struck by what could be a very serious injury that may have been inflicted upon Schnookums. And slowly, people began to peel off of the pile, and there at the bottom, to everyone's surprise and I guess delight, sprung up Schnookums, exclaiming, "I'm going to kill you."
If you were writing the history of Randolph-Macon College from your 40 years, what specific things would you say we'd have to include? Anything?
Well, I'll start,
Oh, okay.
Mary, and
Yeah,
maybe
okay,
you
okay,
can.
that's good.
For 40 years, of course, I haven't. Well, I guess I've been here for 40 years, off and on, since. Well, the college certainly has grown in terms of its physical presence in Ashland. I think the number of buildings has certainly increased by 50%. It's been great to be a part of many of those projects, whether raising money for it or benefiting from them. We are probably today in the best financial condition we've ever been in the history. And it wasn't but 40 years ago that our financial situation was bleak. There was even some consideration that we didn't have enough resources to reopen the following fall. And that was, I believe, in the fall of 1975, soon after I graduated. I think James Scanlon's history will attest to that. So I guess you could say that was perhaps one of the low points of Randolph-Macon's history. And going back even beyond 40 years, there were a number of low points. But Randolph-Macon has a resiliency. It always has, because there were a number of occasions where it probably should not have survived, but it did. And I think it did because of its mission, to provide a foundation of liberal arts, a foundation of education that can afford a young man and now a young woman with an opportunity to do whatever they want to do. I'm convinced there is a body of knowledge that all educated people should master. And I think Randolph-Macon, whether they actually convey that knowledge or give you the tools to be able to get it, over time, does an excellent job of doing that. I have seen its mission change little in those 40 years, and really little from the time that it was established in 1830. So it's kind of a remarkable history, and I have been impressed with the recent leadership. Liddell Payne was an excellent president, and he was able to forge an excellent relationship with the community that supports us, that is the alumni. During his time, alumni participation, alumni engagement, alumni giving soared. And then that was continued by Roger Martin. He built on those successes by building a number of buildings on campus and raised money for them. And I think the new president, Robert Lindgren, I see that of those three, that he may have more of the right stuff to send the college upward and to make it the gem that it really is, that not enough people know about. So I'm very optimistic about the future of the college.
A few of the things I remember along with what Michael is saying is we do things on campus that sometimes upsets some of the alumni, and that's where the majority of our annual giving comes from. Like when they tore down the old gym, we had a lot of people that didn't like that, and they weren't going to give another dime to Randolph-Macon. and then something will happen in a fraternity, and they will be put on probation, and the alumni in that fraternity get mad, and they're not going to give us another dime of their money. But the work of the development office is to keep open lines with these alumni and keep encouraging them and staying in touch and letting them know the good things that's happened at Randolph-Macon. And probably 9 times out of 10, after a few years and they get over their little gripe, they will turn back around and remember Randolph-Macon. And that's part of what we enjoy doing in the development office, is keeping our alumni happy so that they will continue to support Randolph-Macon as best they can. And I will have to say, in my time at Randolph-Macon, I have enjoyed every day that I have come to work, which is probably why I'm still here. But Randolph-Macon has been good to me, and it has been a wonderful place to work.
Well, it is a special place, certainly made special by the people. And I'll have to say this. There's a quote from Dal Wooten. Dal at one time was talking to some alumni about how wonderful it is to be here at Randolph-Macon, and he said that there's a saying in the Ashland community when they come up to you, and a person may say, "Are you at Randolph-Macon, or do you work for a living?" We all worked, certainly, but there were a lot of other certain benefits and privileges associated with working here. In the vein of disgruntled alumni, a funny story, or an interesting story. A number of years ago, there was a fairly prominent Randolph-Macon graduate who was a physician in Richmond, and he became upset over the fact that Randolph-Macon students had invited Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, to campus, and at that time he was under indictment for draft evasion, draft dodging. And nonetheless, he spoke, and on that occasion, this gentleman, Henry Copley, said, "This will be, I will never give Randolph-Macon another penny," during his life. Well, it ended up that he kept his promise. Now, the next question is, why is there a Copley Science Center? And the reason for it is that his wife, days before Henry Copley died, asked him, "What shall we do for Randolph-Macon?" And he said, "I want you to take care of it." And she did, with a $2.5 million gift to name Copley Science Center.
Thank you so much, Mike Carter and Mary Maxwell, for your memories and for your long service at the college for both of you. We appreciate recording these for Making Memories. Thank you.